just fly into a rage and start breaking things and hitting people.
Yeah.
So we had to be very, very quiet and stay out of his way, do whatever he said, and try to, live on the fringes without provoking him too much.
If he found out that the kids or I had any enthusiasm or excitement about participating in anything, or that we might be having friends or any kind of normal life, he would take steps to cut that off.
One of the things that was my dad's favorite to do was to kill the pets or hurt the pets or threaten to kill the pets. He did that a lot.
I remember one day coming home from school, and I went upstairs and there was a rabbit, one of our rabbits, Tibber, lying on the floor, and I went over to him and his neck was broken. And I don't really think rabbits could break their necks all by themselves.
I met him at a party, and it turned out that we had all the same friends. I really thought he was fine, and I married him 6 months after that, and had Catherine 9 months later, and had to leave when she was 10 months old because, he was even hurting the baby. So we were separated for 2 years, and during that time, he was attempting to get custody of Catherine, the baby that he hated. And he told me that I would have to come back or, she would be hurt. So we remarried. When people ask me about that now, they think that sounds absolutely insane. Why would you remarry someone who is a dangerous person and has threatened to kill you and harmed your baby and everything else? But if you were in the situation, you would understand that that was the safest choice that I could make.
Once I got the strength to stop the battery, then it stopped. But it seems like they take their victim into court, and the battery actually amplifies.
The custody battle started where custody slowly got changed to where there was set times when we had to see our dad.
I had custody for about 5 years. In the process, in those 5 years, we went through 2 to 3 full psychological evaluations.
In family court, the judge will appoint a custody evaluator, a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a social worker, to conduct an investigation to make recommendations to the court.
None of the tests have been validated for use in the domestic violence context. Oftentimes, batterers test very normal. In fact, most of the time, batterers test normal. The tests actually tend to make the victim look pathological, a little bit off balance, because the tests do not assess for battering.
More and more time was given to my dad, even though me and my brother were against everything about that. We wrote letters, talked to our attorneys.
The idea is that children cannot speak for themselves in court, and that you need an adult who essentially is representing the child or the child's best interests to the court. Because again, the idea is that neither parent is speaking for the children, they're speaking for themselves. Each state has its own laws about who can be appointed. In my state, you have to be a lawyer, but in some states you don't. And the idea is that they're appointed to represent the child, but there's a lot of confusion and ambiguity in, I think, most states about what that really means. In some states, that means that they speak for the child, and they're actually a voice for the child. In more often, I think that's perceived as speaking for what the guardian themselves thinks is the child's best interests.
The child's lawyer has been documented by a number of people who've studied this issue to be perhaps the greatest impediment to a child being protected in the system, because they don't act like lawyers. They don't talk to the kids, they don't find out the facts, they don't investigate, they just go off and write a report to the court based on some misguided principles.
My own attorney yelled at me. He yelled at me and called me a liar, saying, when I finally think of something that is truthful and not what my mother's telling me, to call him.
There's ex parte hearings. I had 60 of them in my case, where you had a 24-hour notice to answer the documents that you had gotten served 12 or 14 hours before.
Ex parte means on behalf of one party. In a court proceeding, the judge, in order for the judge to be fair and impartial, is prohibited by judicial ethics from accepting information or contacts from just one side.
You can informally call the judge's chambers if you're just trying to find out if they're going to issue a ruling on something that you've already filed, or when are they going to do that, or can we postpone the next hearing, that kind of thing. But what is not considered appropriate is to go before a judge and allege new material and raise new legal issues and new factual issues without notifying the other side.
Now, for some reason, the system, although it's not by anybody saying this is how it should happen, the system in family court in these cases that we're talking about are very frequently the product of ex parte communications.
I had no problem with visitation with my ex, but every time they went for visitation for 2 weeks, there was always an ex parte, which extended the visitation to 3 to 4 months. And then when my sons came back, unfortunately, then the mother gets the brunt of not protecting them, and you get hammered pretty heavily back by your children.
You don't know what you're supposed to counter because you don't know what the judge heard or what the judge believes before you get to court. At least if things are presented in open court, you can respond. So this ex parte communication that occurs in family court in these cases is devastating.
I was very fortunate that the week before my children were taken away from me, that I had an advocate approach me. And to be truthful, I thought she was playing crazy because I still hadn't understood the whole picture of what was going on. And she flat told me, she goes, they're going to take your children away. They're going to do it in the most harmful way. They're going to mock you in court. And they're going to do everything they can to make you come unglued. And I looked at the psychiatrist and I said, you know, I just was courteous to her because she was giving me free time. But to this day, I thank the Lord for her talking to me because exactly what she told me was going to happen happened in court that day. An ex parte hearing, my boys are crying and hanging on to me, being told and torn off of me, and said they were going to have to live in Indiana because their mother was alienating them from their father.
I was really touched by all of you wonderful ladies, but again, we are all in the same boat here. And I just want to say, I know it's very hard for all of us, but first of all, we have to deal with how am I going to translate my emotional status. I mean, here you're going to talk about emotions to your child. How are you going to translate this, all these emotions you have? And then we all have our cultural backgrounds. So are you going to be screaming? Are you going to be standing? How is that going to be looked at? Like earlier it was said, you know, men can't just be mad and, you know, people will attend to that. Oh, he's upset. Well, women, when we go and express our anger, we're crazy. We're all the other names. I can't even think of it myself. He told me once, he made me and he will unmake me. And this is what's going on with him, that he has this belief, this poor African woman that he brought her, got education and is doing so well, academically and professionally and financially and relationship-wise, that it's to him, it's not possible. And he always feels he has to unmake me. To a certain extent, yeah, taking my child away from me for this period of time will unmake any woman.
My father has a way of making important people in custody believing him that he is a good father, that he has never done anything wrong, and I'm almost crazy and abusive. He cries during the hearing, and if you ever see a 6'3" white grown man cry in front of you, you think, what a horrible teenager he must have, you know, that poor guy. And he plays it to the full extent. He's manipulative and he knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for 15 years.
We've been in legal custody since she was 5 months old. My mother once told me, you know, when I was so tired and I wanted to give up, she says, Remember chickens. You go after the chickens' babies, the little chicks. The mother chicken will come after you and just literally attack you. And she said, you're stronger than a chicken.
My father would check me over every time I walked into his house from my mother's. If there's any mark on my body, and he'd go to the courthouse and he'd document that as abuse. One time when I was 3 or 4, my mom was ironing clothes and I stepped on an iron and it burned my ankle. He said my mother was deliberately burning me. I was taken away from my mother and I was sent to live with my father without any contact from my mom for 3 years. During those years, my dad used to slander my mother frequently, telling me she was a drug abuser. You know, she ran off to Africa with a new husband and she has a new family now and she doesn't want to come back. You know, she's a whore, she doesn't want me anymore, she abandoned me, and, you know, she abused me so much that she, you know, that if I ever saw her, she'd kill me. What he was doing to my mother and me was beyond my comprehension at the time, so I thought he was this great guy, and I had never even fathomed that he would lie to me. So part of me, you know, really knew it wasn't true and she was my mom and she's never done this. And then the other part of me is like, well, this is my dad. He would never lie to me.
Since we have research showing that children's relationship with their mother is the #1 factor in how resilient they're going to be to the experiences of having witnessed domestic violence, we know that the long-term harm to children from having a father damaging, destroying their relationship with their mother is potentially huge.
At the end of the 3 years, I went to a therapist who suggested that I go start reunification with my mother. At first, I was really adamant. I did not want to do it. I was like, you know, she's forgotten about me all these 3 years. You know, she didn't want me. She ran off. And I just, you know, spilling out everything my dad had been, you know, brainwashing me for the past 3 years. But then after I met her and through months and months of visitation, you know, finally I realized she's not the person he's painted her to be. He must be lying, and I put 2 and 2 together.
He was just this wonderful attorney there, not a father, no emotions. And sees some objects that he has to get back that was taken from him.
I then requested to, you know, maybe at the end of 8th grade year, because, you know, I'd be going on to high school, I would move with her. Ever since then, he started becoming, you know, more hostile, more, I don't know, more resentful of me.
The first time she was 13, she was put in a foster home by her dad, voluntary basis. How many teenagers would want to say, the first time I ever turned my teenage year, I was put in foster home?
After 10 months, he didn't enjoy the financial burden it had to keep me in voluntary foster care, so we struck a deal. He said, you come stay the last 2 months of 8th grade with me, and then I'll let you go live with your mom. So the day before I'm supposed to go with my mom and I'm packing, my dad tells me, oh, change of plans. You're not going home. He's like, you know what? You treat my wife, you treat me, and I don't like you because you're so I'm not going to allow you to go back home.
Emotional abuse is the systematic diminishment of a child. It is never an event. It is a pattern of behavior. It is a sequence of events. Again, it's never a single event. And it has a goal. Its goal is to diminish the self-concept of the child, that the child feels unworthy of friendship,